Good morning, my friends. Today we're going to read The Secret Garden, chapters 16, 17, and 18. Thanks for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 16, An Argument. Mary had almost forgotten about seeing Colin that afternoon. After lunch, she asked Martha to tell him that she couldn't come until later. That'll put him in a bad mood, Martha said fearfully. But Mary wasn't used to thinking of others' feelings. She didn't understand how lonely life could be for a person who was ill and nervous and thought he couldn't control his temper. She and Dickon worked all afternoon. They rested a little, and Dickon played a song on his flute. He told her about the trees that would bloom before the spring was over: apple, cherry, peach, and plum. As the sun set, they both promised to return to the garden the next morning. When she returned, Martha was waiting. Her face was not happy. Mr. Colin's been acting terrible all afternoon, Martha said. We've had quite a time keeping him quiet. You should have gone to see him today. But Mary didn't feel guilty or afraid when she went to his room. She marched straight up to him and said, "Why are you still in bed?" "I got up this morning thinking you were coming," he said, looking away. "But I made them put me in bed this afternoon. My back and my head ached. Why didn't you come?" "I was in the garden with Dickon," she said. "I won't let him come here any more," said Colin in his Rajah manner. Mary grew angry and stubborn. "If you send Dickon away, I'll never visit you again." "I'll make you," he shouted. "They'll drag you here." "Oh, will they, Mr. Rajah?" Mary said fiercely. "But they can't make me talk to you or look at you." Even though they couldn't have a rough and tumble fight, they could yell and shout. "You're selfish!" Colin cried. "No, you're selfish!" Mary shouted. "I'm not as selfish as Dickon," Colin yelled. "He keeps you playing in the dirt when he knows I'm here all alone." Mary's eyes flashed with anger. "Dickon's nicer than any other boy!" she exclaimed. "He's magical. He's like an angel." "He's just a common country boy," Colin said with a sneer. "He's better than a common Rajah," Mary shouted back. Their arguing was getting the better of Colin. He'd never had a fight with anyone who argued back, so he turned his head away and cried a little tear of self-pity. "I'm not selfish," he whimpered. "I'm ill. I have a lump on my back and I'm going to die soon." "You are not," Mary said frostily. "But I am. Everybody says so," Colin cried. "I don't believe it," Mary said sourly. "You say that to make people sorry for you. You're proud of it." At that, Colin was so angry that he forgot his aching back and sat up straight. "Get out of my room!" he screamed. He threw his pillow at her. It landed at his feet. Mary went to the door. She stopped to say, "I was going to tell you all sorts of nice things about Dickon's fox cub and his crow, but now I won't tell you a single thing." And she stormed out. Walking back to her room, Mary felt cross. She was thinking that she wouldn't tell Colin about the secret garden. It would serve him right. Then she remembered how afraid Colin was that he would become a hunchback and die. She knew he had tantrums when he was tired and afraid. Oops. Just Maybe he was thinking about lumps because he was alone this afternoon, she thought. I think I will go see him tomorrow, even if he throws pillows at me. Chapter 17. A Tantrum. But Mary didn't see Colin the next day. Instead, she worked in the garden till sunset. She was very tired and went to bed soon after supper. She decided to see her cousin the following afternoon. In the middle of the night, dreadful noises awoke her. She heard doors slamming and someone crying and screaming horribly. "It's Colin," she said. "He's having hysterics." Just listening made her feel sick and shivery. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the noise was too loud. She wanted to have a tantrum herself, to frighten Colin as much as he was frightening everyone else. Mary hurried to Colin's room. The closer she got, the louder were his screams. She slapped open his door and ran to his bed. "You stop!" she shouted. "I hate you. Everybody does. You'll scream yourself to death in a few minutes, and I wish you would." She went on. Her words were just the shock Colin needed. He was lying on his stomach, jumping around like a caught fish. His face was red and swollen, and he gasped and choked. But Mary didn't care. "If you scream again, I'll scream louder than you," she shouted. "I can't stop," he wept. "I felt a lump on my back." Then he turned over and sobbed some more, but he didn't scream. "No, you didn't," Mary said fiercely. "If you felt something, it was imaginary, hysterical lump. Let me look." She called to the nurse. "Come show me his back this minute." The nurse, Mrs. Medlock, and Martha all huddled in the doorway. The nurse seemed afraid to touch Colin, but he gasped in fear. Show her, then she'll see." The nurse gently pulled down Colin's nightshirt to expose his spine. Colin was pitifully thin, and his ribs showed. Mary examined his back with her most solemn expression. "There's not a single lump," she proclaimed at last. "Nothing but backbone. You can feel it because you're so thin. There's not a lump as big as a pin. If you ever say it again, I'll just laugh." No one had spoken to him this way before. The adults didn't know about his secret fear, and he never told any, or he had never known other children who might have told him the truth. Now Mary was so angry and cross that he almost believed her. The nurse said, "I didn't know. He thought he had a lump. His back is weak from disuse, but there's no lump." "There isn't?" Colin asked with a sob. "None at all, sir," the nurse replied. Do, do you think I could live to grow up?" For a change, Mary heard him speak like a real boy, not like a Rajah. The nurse told him what the London doctor had said. "You probably will, if you do as you're told, control your temper and get plenty of fresh air." Colin felt warm out and became gentler. Mary, too, was not angry anymore. He put out his hand for her to take. "I'd like to go out with you," Colin said. "I won't hate fresh air if we can find—" He stopped himself. He'd almost said the secret garden. Then he said, "I'd like to go out if Dickon could push my chair. I'd like to meet Dickon and his animals." The nurse brought the children cups of tea, and Mrs. Medlock and Martha slipped away. The nurse told Colin that he needed to sleep, but Mary could stay for another half hour. But when the nurse had gone, Colin squeezed Mary's hand. "I almost told them about the secret garden," he said anxiously. but I stopped myself. Have you found a way in yet?" Mary looked into his eyes, red and swollen. "Yes," she said softly, "I think I have. If you go to sleep, I'll tell you everything tomorrow." "Won't you tell me what you imagine it looks like?" Colin begged. This was better than picture books. "You can pretend you've seen it." Colin's eyes were already heavy, so Mary talked him to sleep. She told him how the rose vines might climb over the walls and hang from a tree branches, and how daffodils and snowdrops might be growing underground. She told him how the birds might build their nests there, where it was safe and quiet. Colin very happily fell asleep. Chapter 18. Sharing a Secret. Mary slept late into the next morning. Martha awoke her and said, "Colin is feeling ill after his tantrum." But he asked, "Please, if Miss Mary will come and talk to me." Imagine him saying, "Please, will you go?" Mary agreed. She was wearing her hat when she went into Colin's room. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked in a weary but pleased voice. "I have to talk to Dickon, but I'll be back soon," she said. "It's about the secret garden." Colin's eyes lit up. "Oh, I dreamed about it last night," he remarked. "I'll keep imagining it until you come back." 5 minutes later, Mary was in the garden. Dickon was working with two squirrels called Nut and Shell sitting on his shoulders. Captain lay on the ground, and Soot perched on a tree branch. Mary told Dickon about her idea that he could visit Colin the next day with the animals. After a few days, they could bring Colin outside. "Aye, 'tis a good plan," Dickon agreed. Mary wanted to stay in the garden, but she knew Colin was waiting. She hurried back to his bedside, where Colin did a strange thing. He sniffed her. "I smell flowers and fresh things," he said. "It's cool and warm and sweet at the same time." "Aye, lad," she said, just as Dickon would. "It's the wind from the moor and the smell of new grass in the springtime." Mary talked to Colin about Dickon and his animals. She told him about Soot and Captain and the two squirrels. She described the wild pony that followed Dickon across the moor. "Does the pony really understand Dickon?" Colin asked. "It seems like magic," Mary replied. "But Dickon says that anything will understand you if you're friends with it for sure." "I've never had anyone to be friends with," Colin said sadly, "and I can't bear other people." "What about me?" Mary asked. "Oh, I like you," Colin said. "I used to not like anybody," Mary admitted, "but I got to know Ben and the Robin and Dickon. I probably wouldn't like you if I hadn't met them first." "I wouldn't mind Dickon looking at me," Colin said. "I'm glad," Mary answered, "because—" Then she told him about the plan for Dickon's visit, about finding the key and the ivy-covered door, and about their work to make the secret garden grow. "Oh, Mary," he said with a kind of sob, "will I live to go in and see it?" "Of course you will," Mary snapped. "Don't be silly." Colin relaxed and laughed at himself. Then Mary said, "I couldn't tell you about the garden before because I was afraid. But now I trust you for sure." Okay, my friends, thank you so much for spending this time with me. Please come back next week for chapters 19, 20, and 21. Thank you so much, my friends. Have a great day. Bye bye now.